Hello and welcome to the Simply Trade News Roundup. We're here with another episode. It is currently Monday. We're recording this episode on March the 7th, so some things might be changing. So let me introduce them real quick. We have JD Gonzalez. You guys have known him. He's been on multiple times, not on the news, but he's been on with Lalo and Andy a couple of times. He's the president of the NCBFA. Which actually, there's a conference coming up, and we will be there, I assume. That will be my first time. I'm very excited. And then we also have Brian Barber, nominating committee chair. Let me know if that's correct. That's what I've gathered. Yes?
Former nominating committee chair.
Former. Okay.
But current Area 1 representative for NCBFAA.
Well, today we're talking about a couple of things, such as USMCA. There was just a new announcement that all goods coming under USMCA are exempt from the tariffs, which we did not initially see because on March 4th, all tariffs were due for 25%. So everything that was coming across Mexico and Canada, 25%. So I kind of want to start with the USMCA. What happened March 4th for you guys?
So I guess I can start there. So I think, we saw, things that kind of ran the gambit on March 4th, right? We had some customers that said, we're going to take a wait and see approach, right? So I might not ship. I'm going to see how things shake out over the next couple of days, right? We had folks that had orders to fulfill, right? And so those goods moved, regardless of tariff, right? And so they had done some forecasting. I think there was a massive push to try to get goods in prior to that March 4th effective date, right? We certainly saw surges in folks trying to get, basically documentation over and shipments processed. However, we don't control oftentimes the conveyance, right? And so, the importers must work very closely with their carrier partners to coordinate, the arrival and the release of goods at the border. So, I think just to kind of sum it up, there's a big push to get things in prior to the March 4th date. You had some people that, were taking a wait and see approach, and you had some folks that, it was business as usual. And what I'd say from just a volume perspective, first couple of days, things kind of went along as normal, I would say. At least that's what we experienced. But over the last day and a half, we did see a pretty significant decline in volumes coming our way along the northern border, to the tune of, I'd say, probably like 35%.
And to add to that, we had the same kind of situations here on the southern border, that Brian was talking about. The only thing about it is we've always had some situations with equipment, shortage of equipment. And due to the fact that everybody was trying to cross prior to actually March 3rd, 11:01 Central Time, based on the time frame, we had, just volumes, more volumes than normal crossing. But after that, in the last day or so, most of everybody was kind of anticipating what was happening last night. I'm going to sit there and go again. Last night, 11:01 p.m. Central Time, due to the fact that that's when the tariff shift changed as well. And so there a lot of equipment was being held at the border. So we have over 2,000 trucks, I saw a report, and that creates that shortage of equipment in addition to drivers just sitting and waiting to cross. I have a feeling today we're going to be extremely saturated just to kind of catch up with the backlogs. But then during that 2-day time frame, since these are not retroactive, there will be duties applied. So a lot of individuals that cross during that 2-day time frame, the small and mid-sized business, I've been communicating with them, and some are responding, some are not, just to the challenge that they thought that this was not going to happen. So like Brian said, I have a feeling they're going to slow down the small and mid-sized, or they're going to start importing just until April 2nd. And I think there'll be a bigger hit than the bigger companies. The bigger companies are taking a more of a reactive action. I would like to say proactive, but then we really don't know what's happening, because as of yesterday, when the information came out, we were notified in the morning around 11 o'clock that, there was an agreement. The executive order didn't come out till about 4 o'clock yesterday afternoon. And then we had the CSMS and the FRN, and that, Customs Service Messaging System, or the Federation notice didn't come out till about 6, 7 last night. And then we had until 11 o'clock Central Time, like I said, because 12:01 in the Eastern Time, to make decisions and start moving forward. And a lot of people we didn't want to cross last night. We just tell them don't risk it. Wait till the next day, and everything's going to should start flowing as normal. Next week, once we start getting the equipment back in order, we should be going back to normal just for at least a month. But expect the same thing to happen on March 31st, April 1st. Just a flood of merchandise crossing the border. So
yeah, I mean, I would say that you have to work closely with your broker as a partner, right? I mean, at the end of the day, what we're doing is we are, running reports, creating work managements based on, time and action, and the actions that were in effect at that exact period, right? So that way, like, I'll give you a great example, right? We had entries that were processed, prior to March 4th, right? And we were unsure when they were going to cross the border. So they were originally processed without the attached IEPA tariff numbers. Conveyance doesn't cross until after March 4th. So now IEPA is applicable, right? Because now it's within the danger zone of the tariffs, right? So now we have to go back, capture all those ones that were previously processed, round them up, and then make sure that we are adding the IEPA tariff appropriately. So that way the proper amount is calculated and sent to CBP.
What kind of struggles have you heard from your importers?
I would say, a couple of themes I think we're seeing emerge, right? So I think one, like the power of chaos and misinformation. So things are coming so quickly, right? And it's extremely challenging to stay up and on top of what is happening at that exact moment. And we are getting things in piecemeal. JD kind of threw this out a little bit earlier. In the respect of, you have the executive order. Well, you might actually have a news article break first, right? Rumors are a news article. Then you'll see the EO, which kind of gives you a piece of the puzzle, right? So we're looking for language within that there. And then, of course, cash flow as well, right? Again, I think we were talking a little bit offline about this, but in the land border environment, with USMCA often in play, not high level of duties, right? So a lot of times brokers would tender on behalf of the importer. And now the rules of engagement have changed, right? And so if you take 25% across an entire swath of clients that was previously USMCA, those numbers add up very quickly. And a lot of chaos, some misinformation. I think really managing the cash flow component has been a big piece. And I think, again, folks are looking for ways to minimize the impact.
Just to add a little bit to Brian's comments, one of the things, like you said, the common theme was price paid or payable. And so, everybody just looked at the actual price. Now they're itemizing. So they're trying to deduct, freight charges or insurances. And some other individuals are trying to be creative and work on additional pricing. Like Brian said, in addition to the valuation, there's a lot of methods, but then you got to take in consideration there's a right method and there's a method that, people are just trying to work with creative language. And even now, March 7th, the date that came out, it's only USMCA qualifying. Non-USMCA still has to pay the 25%.
Without a valid USMCA certificate of origin, you will not be exempt from those tariffs. How quickly can people get that?
It really depends on, what kind of commodities you're dealing with, right? And whether or not you're looking for a shift in tariff or you're looking for regional value content, right? Because there's a couple different, ways USMCA can be qualified. But a lot of it, relates back to the records that the importer might have on file, right? And they get a bill of materials together, which will show all the commodities, sort of all the breakout, the value of all that. They might have to procure USMCA certificates from some other suppliers, right, to be able to base their certification on. So, a lot of it really does depend on how good the importer's existing records are, and how far back and easily they can get information from their suppliers. And put together really a case to be able to provide to their broker or their consultant or their trade attorneys to walk through the process, right? My advice, I would say, certainly work with a partner that understands the ins and outs of it, and they can walk you through, specifically your commodity type, what is the requirement for USMCA, and what information do you need to gather. But depending on how good your records are, I think will turn around how quickly you can make the determination of whether or not your goods are actually eligible.
This is not new. This has only been for 2 days. So a lot of the importers that were already qualified for USMCA is just going to be status quo. But instead of going with with the last 2 digits, and I'm talking the southern border, I think the northern border has a different number. We're going to go from 01 pays 25%, 04 is duty free for right now until April 2nd. Then we'll see how we move forward. I believe Canada has another last 2 digits. But like Brian alluded, unless you're a new importer, then that's when you really have to go through a lot of these steps. But the previous ones, they already know what's USMCA qualifying and non-qualifying.
You can have new parts too, right? New parts could come in, right? And as folks have new parts, they're going to have to work through that qualification process, right? So, I think there still are stages in which, USMCA verification is going to be, it's going to be needed.
As brokers, we have to make sure our importers are compliant. But then the next step is you're looking at on the 11th, you're looking at steel and aluminum. So we're going to be working on through another process on Monday as well. So
how has that impacted some of the importing?
The steel and aluminum isn't just, it's not tied just to Canada or Mexico, right? So that's a macro right across all countries, right? So one of the questions I immediately have is, if you're USMCA, I think logic would reason that maybe the steel tariff won't apply, but I haven't seen any language to clarify that, right? And so one of the questions I have off the hop is, March 12th, will Mexican and Canadian steel still be subject to that 25%, right? Because everything that we've been thinking is stacking in aggregate, right? So I think that's certainly a point of clarification as industry that we'll want to see, hopefully sooner than later. As far as derivatives, we've been doing impact assessments. There have been a couple annexes that were published out in the FRNs, which detail the tariff numbers that will be subject to, the derivative steel and aluminum tariffs. Great example. Like we have an importer that does like metal furniture, right? And typically that was not subject to any kind of steel or licensing requirements, but now derivatives would be a component potentially for a tariff. And, one of the things that we're looking at right now is, are importers ready to be able to, supply that information, right? I kind of always use I just sort of say, is this something that they have readily available that can be provided and put on a statement or put on paperwork? Or is this something that only Ernie, the engineer in your company, has tucked away in a file cabinet, right? And it's going to be very difficult to supply, right, on a shipment by shipment basis. So, that's part of our communication out right now, right? Make sure you're ready. While steel and aluminum derivatives may be on pause, it's coming. And can you supply the info and the makeup of what you'll need to supply to be able to properly pay the tariff? Because otherwise, I think the alternative from what I've read and what I've been seeing is you can pay 100%, and obviously people don't want to pay 100%.
As brokers, they're kind of thinking, well, maybe you might have more information. And us being on a national level, we're just like everybody else. Everything comes out whenever we find the information all at the same time. And our biggest question is definitions of details. Like Brian said, derivatives. That's very, very key. And once we find out the information, we can share that with our clients who are just leaning on every word that we have to say, knowing that we're the expert. At the same time, we just have to rely on the administration to provide details. But like everything came out yesterday, we're kind of looking at maybe Monday. We might have some kind of information to share with our clients so we can kind of move forward and take the next steps, which is something that it puts a lot of responsibility on us and a lot of challenges on us as brokers, because I know we're working with our software providers, and a lot of times on previous administration, they had a testing period. This one, everything is live. It's just, learn and correct the mistakes as they're going through so we can make sure that we can process and do our entry, our calculations, and provide it to our client as soon as possible. As Brian alluded to earlier, that they have to fund, and they have to fund us to make sure that we're funded on that, in that aspect. And they just want to get the accurate information almost immediately. And it's kind of, sometimes we have to wait on our software providers to do that.
CBP, I think has been pretty good over these rollouts and getting, the new 99 or IEPA numbers out, right? Just, for us to be able to ingest in the system, right, via ABI. But it is certainly a scramble, right, to JD's point, right? Like we're getting information, close to, I'll call it end of business day sometimes, right? And, you're configuring your systems to work one way, and then X amount of hours later, you're rolling it back, right? And then you're trying to capture work managements. Our software providers are having to, pivot on a dime, right, to provide information to us. And you're often undoing work, right? And that adds to sort of that chaos and all the different, just scenarios that we're working through.
To wrap this up, what are like some of the top tips that you have to be compliant?
When you get that executive order, or when you get that tweet, that's just informational. You have to wait for the CSMS message or that FRN to provide those guidelines that we need as brokers community to share with our clients. But then we as brokers community have to focus down in the weeds and wait for the additional guidelines so we can kind of promote that, share what we have, and see what direction we can guide you in to make sure that we're in compliance. At the same time, get the best cost for your best bang for your buck to make sure that we do the importing, and we can kind of assist with, maybe the valuation process to make sure that you're still legally within the legal realms of that. So,
right. Like I think transparency is real big. If you provide good information to your broker, chances are you're going to get a good opinion, right? If information is withheld, it's very possible that you'll get an incorrect opinion, right? How much time do you really have to prepare for what ultimately could be another round of tariffs? I'll say right now is a little bit up in the air, right? So, we have time right now. If there were things or projects that you were trying to advance, my advice would be do not take your foot off the gas. So take the time that we have to be ready. Make sure you've got your information together for USMCA. Talk to your brokers, talk to your trade attorneys, and just be ready. Check your cash flow, right? Are you ACH? If you have not filed an application as an importer for ACH directly with CBP right now, that's something you need to strongly consider.
Thank you so much. We'll probably see you again on the podcast, hopefully, maybe with Lalo and Andy, get a little bit deeper into things. Thank you guys for listening. I hope this helped. If you have any questions, concerns, please reach out to us, and any concerns to JD or Brian, you can also send it to us and I'll forward it. And that is all. See you next week, Monday. Bye. Thank you guys so much.